A plant from the Americas was growing on Pacific Islands before any European ship reached them. The Philippines sits on the far side of that ocean, nearer Asia than America, and these islands got that same plant late, by sea, from Mexico under a Mexican name, camote. That word did not start here. It is Nahuatl, from central Mexico. 3 names for this one plant circle the Pacific: kumara, camote, batata. Each belongs to a different crossing, and if your word is one of those 3, it tells you which crossing reached you. 3 names, 3 crossings, and for one of them, almost every date we have is a date on something lying beside the plant, not on the plant itself. Somewhere each of those dates is typed on a card under glass. This is not a fringe reading. In antiquity, in 2024, Ian Barber of the Department of Archaeology at the University of Otago and Rebecca Benham of Heritage New Zealand Puhera Taonga set out that the widely accepted AD 1000 to 1100 chronology at Mangaia rested on unidentified charcoal, and that remodeling of short-lived plant material now supports uranium series dates on coral of AD 1361 to 1466. It is open access. The link is below. Before anything else, 5 words: camote, camatis, sayote, atsuete, cacao. Every one of them carried here from Mexico. Say them out loud if you can. They are on the screen if you would rather not. You need nothing else, and you do not need to move. Most retellings say the sweet potato reached Polynesia around AD 1000, and that nobody can explain how. Both halves have moved. That date has been shrinking for the better part of a decade, and the problem was never a shortage of explanations. It was that the explanations disagree and still do. Everything here comes from the documents: Antiquity, PNAS, Nature, Current Biology, and a report written at Arevalo in June 1582 by Miguel de Loarca for the Spanish crown. 4 parts. First, the 3 names and how yours got here. Then a date that got younger in the Cook Islands, and then in Butuan. Then 2 published papers that put this plant in the Philippines in years when Spain had no route to bring it on. And underneath all of them, the question nobody has closed, whether anyone carried it at all. The word in your mouth is Mexican. Camote comes from camotli. The real Academia Española derives Spanish camote straight from it, and Amano and colleagues, writing in the Holocene in 2021, listed among dozens of American plants growing in the Philippines under names carried from Mexico. Nahuatl reference works gloss camotli from Book 11 of the Florentine Codex, compiled in Mexico in 1577, a twisted cylindrical root on a creeping plant, edible raw or cooked in a pot. A word is a label. It makes a claim about where a thing came from, and labels can be wrong about that. You have probably filed camote beside gabi and ube, in the drawer marked Ours. It belongs there now. It did not start there. It came the other way, across the Pacific, from the east. In 2013, Roulier and colleagues published work in PNAS separating 2 source gene pools, one centered on Peru and Ecuador, one on the Caribbean and Central America, sitting behind 3 proposed lines of introduction. Kumara, out of the Peru and Ecuador pool in eastern Polynesia. Camote, out of the Caribbean and Central American pool, through the Manila Galleon. Batata, out of that same pool, by a different European route. In living plants, the pattern has been badly blurred by later movement, which is why Roulier's team went to herbarium sheets instead, including material collected on Cook's first voyage in 1769. But there is one document that fixes when the word reached these islands, not a paper. A report to the king, Arevalo, June 1582. Miguel de Loarca, writing of Cebu and of the Visayans generally, lists what the people keep and eat: fowls, swine, some goats, beans, and then roots like the batatas of Santo Domingo, which, he writes, they call camotes. He also gives the name camotes to islets east of Cebu. Now go back to the 5 words on your screen: camote, camates, sayote, atsuete, cacao. All 5 came from Mexico. Here is what did not: the Maori kumara, the Hawaiian uala. Barber and Benham write that reconstruction as Proto-East Polynesian, and the archaeological picture, summarized in PNAS, puts the introduction by roughly AD 1200 to 1300, before any European ship reached those islands. If that already seems surprising, what is coming next is more so, because that AD 1200 to 1300 is the late estimate. The one you have heard is older, and it is the number that broke. 3,500 years ago, people crossed more than 2,000 kilometers of open water and reached the Marianas. In a moment, we are going to argue about a few centuries. A D1000 was never a date on a sweet potato. Start with what is solid. In 1991, in antiquity, Hather and Kirch reported carbonized sweet potato tissue from the Tangatatau rock shelter on Mangaya in the Cook Islands. Barber and Benham cite that identification without challenge. The problem is what the date was attached to. It came from unidentified charcoal lying in the same deposits, not from the plant. Charcoal in an archaeological layer is anything that burned: a roof beam, a hearth, driftwood, a tree that had already been standing for centuries when someone cut it. It sits beside the thing you care about, and it answers a different question. In 2019, Niaspolo, Sharp, and Kirch, the same Kirch, returning to the same site, published uranium series dates on coral abraders from those deposits in the Journal of Archaeological Science. Barber and Benham report that remodeling of short-lived plant material now supports a range of AD 1361 to 1466 for that context. Picture the card under the glass. Somebody typed AD 1000 on it, and it was right given what was known. Now somebody has to type it again. The same correction has already happened in this country. It happened in Butuan first. In 1987, Ronquillo published radiocarbon results for the excavated Butuan boats, 320 CE, 1250 CE, 1215 CE, one assemblage, roughly 900 years apart. That 320 is still printed on signage and still circulating online. Then in 2014, accelerator mass spectrometry dating of 7 timber samples from 5 of the boats returned results in the late 8th to early 10th centuries. 2 archipelagos, better instruments. Same direction of travel, younger. And one of them is ours, which means this is not a story about somebody else's museum. The dates moving is the honest part of the science. What is harder to forgive is a date that never moves because nobody checks it, which is exactly what happened to the year the sweet potato is said to have reached the Philippines. 2 published papers place the sweet potato's arrival in the Philippines in years when the route they named did not yet exist. In 2013, Roulier and colleagues wrote in PNAS that Manila to Acapulco galleons brought the Mesoamerican camote to the Philippines around 1500. The same lead author's paper in Heredity, that same year, says the galleons could have spread it very soon after the Spanish conquest of these islands in 1522. Now hold those against the record. The Manila to Acapulco route opened in 1565 after Urdaneta and Arellano found the return crossing on the Kuroshio Current. 65 years after the date in PNAS, 43 after the date in Heredity. Spanish ships did cross from Mexico before that: Loaiza in 1525, Villalobos in 1542, and Amano's own team suspects one of them, but not in 1500. In 1500, nobody had crossed the Pacific at all, and there was no Spanish conquest in 1522 either. Magellan died at Mactan the year before. The conquest is Legazpi, 43 years later. That paper is not just early, it is dating the plant to an event that did not happen. But here is what matters. Nobody measured 1500. It is received chronology, a date carried into these papers from an older framework, not produced by either of them. The genetics in that work is careful. The year is background nobody stopped to check because it was not what the paper was about. Against that, the archive is unglamorous and specific. The earliest account Amano's team quotes in full is Loarca at Arevalo in 1582, 82 years after the year in PNAS. Then Pretty in 1588 off Capel. Then Morga in the Sucesos of 1609, recording people in Zambales eating boiled camotes. 3 witnesses, 27 years. No new card ever had to be typed for any of them. There is one older Philippine mention, and it is the interesting one. Pigafetta on Magellan's voyage lists camotes among what people in the central Philippines ate. Taken at face value, that puts the plant here before any galleon. Amano's team, following W.H. Scott, judge it more likely he mistook taro or yams, And I think they are right, because Pigafetta was naming unfamiliar food in an unfamiliar language, and because the next accounts to name it come more than 20 years later. But the ambiguity is real, and you should know it is sitting there. What I just walked through in a couple of minutes took weeks to assemble, because almost every number in it has a superseded version and a current one, and they look identical written down. So there is a source card pinned in the description, every date in this video, where it came from, and whether it still stands. Before you repeat 320 AD or 1500, check it against the card. That is what it is for. Still ahead in this video, a study published in 2024 that has not reached the retellings yet. So far, this has been about dates on paper. Underneath them is the fourth question, whether anyone carried this plant at all, and it starts somewhere unexpected. This plant has no home here. Barber and Benham note that no native population of Ipomoea batatas, as distinct from escaped feral plants, has been recorded anywhere in the Indo-Pacific. Whatever route the sweet potato took, it did not begin in these waters. Something moved it. And the voyagers who made those crossings set out from here. In 2021, Pugac and colleagues published ancient DNA from two individuals buried on Guam about 2,200 years ago. Their ancestry links to the Philippines. They cluster genetically with early Lapita individuals from Vanuatu and Tonga, and Pugac's team suggests those early Mariana Islanders may have been involved in the settlement of Polynesia. So the voyaging tradition that eventually reached those gardens ran out of an archipelago that would not taste this plant for another 17 centuries. That is the pattern across this whole field. A result lands as settlement, and then the method underneath it gets re-examined. Something else was supposed to settle this, and it did not. In 2007, a single radiocarbon-dated chicken bone from El Arenal 1 in Chile was reported as evidence of pre-Columbian Polynesian contact with South America. A year later, another team sequenced 41 modern Chilean chickens and modeled a marine carbon offset the first study had not applied. The Philippine thread survived anyway. That same ancestral Polynesian motif chicken lineage turns up in modern Philippine samples. But without the last piece, published in 2024, none of it quite closes. There is a published case that nobody carried this plant anywhere. Everything so far assumes hands. A hull, a cutting kept alive across weeks of open water, someone deciding it was worth the room. That assumption does a great deal of work, and in 2018 a team went at it directly. Munoz, Rodriguez, Scotland, and colleagues published in Current Biology a phylogeny built from whole chloroplasts in hundreds of nuclear regions. They placed the sweet potato's divergence from its closest wild relative, Ipomoea trifida, at least 800,000 years ago. And one specimen, collected in Polynesia by Banks and Solander in 1769, on Cook's first voyage, carries a distinct genetic signature which they read as separating from American populations more than 100,000 years ago. Their conclusion is careful, and it is worth getting exactly right. They do not say no human carried it. They say the evidence negates the need to invoke ancient human-mediated transport, a claim about what you are obliged to assume, not about what happened. It drew objections immediately, enough that 3 of the authors posted a preprint the same year restating their reasoning. Worth reading, because it is the one place they meet the argument head-on. And in 2022, Temin and colleagues wrote in Quaternary Science Reviews that the genomic account and the linguistic and archaeological account remain unreconciled, then declined to resolve it. So the paper record argues with itself, which is why what appeared in September 2024 matters, because it did not come from paper, it came from 15 people. In Nature, Moreno-Meyer and colleagues published whole genomes from 15 ancient Rapa Nui individuals. All 15 carry Native American ancestry. Around 10%, on the author's own summary, their estimates run from about 6 to about 11. Using a method that combines the genetic signal with the radiocarbon dates, they place that mixing at about 1250 to 1430. Before Columbus reached the Americas at all, not inferred from the living, from people who died in the 1700s and whose genomes still carry the date. And the 2024 result does not sit neatly on top of the one everybody cites. In 2020, Ioannidis and colleagues had published in Nature an analysis of 807 individuals from 17 island populations and 15 Pacific Coast Native American groups, finding contact around AD 1200 with a group most closely related to present-day Colombians. The 2024 team's ancestry tracks point somewhere else, to Central Andean highland populations. And neither study dates a voyage. Both date a mixing event, children with parents from two populations. That is a person, not a boat. The contact is visible in bone now, not just in living blood. We still cannot say which coast, so the people are dated, from their own remains. The plant is not. Count the dates in this video. Charcoal at Mangaya, coral abraders from the same deposits, palm endocarp at Anakina on Rapa Nui, mollusk tools at Anaho in the Marquesas, deposits at Triangle Flat in Golden Bay. Everyone dates the sweet potato's neighbors, and in 2020, Anderson and Pecci called for a critical review of nearly all the pre-1400 dates in Aotearoa. Two are dates on the plant itself. At Kohala, AD 1290 to 1430, on a route the excavators identified only as favoring sweet potato. At Puarua, AD 980 to 1280, an outlier, on Anderson and Pecci's reading, from a post-1500 context, one hedge, one outlier. That is the direct evidence. Three names then: Kumara before any European ship, Batata by a European route, Camote by galleon, and a man at Arevalo in 1582 writing down a word he had heard. Two people buried on Guam link back to these islands. The archipelago those voyages came out of was the last to taste it. In Butuan, the boats have their card, and it has been retyped once. Somewhere there is a date nobody has typed yet. This is not really about a root crop. Filipino history is usually argued by whoever can produce the oldest date, and the oldest dates here have all given way. 320 AD and AD 1000 because the instruments improved, 1500 because nobody had measured it. What held was the unglamorous thing, somebody writing down what he saw and dating it. Pigafetta did that too and still got the plant wrong, but his page carries a date, and that is why we can catch him. You can hold a camote in one hand. Every name it has ever carried is somebody's record of a crossing, and one of those crossings is still missing its boat. Send this to whoever taught you that 320 AD.